In the small and often overlooked town of Redwood Junction, Arkansas, life moved slowly enough for memories to echo. Every morning, Morgan Greg Freeman, a once celebrated jazz trumpeter from the 1970s, rolled into Maple House Diner in his worn wheelchair, wearing an old fedora and a gentle smile. Morgan was known for his calm presence, his deep voice, and the dignity that followed him like a shadow. Locals whispered about his past, sold-out concerts, civil rights marches, the night he played trumpet under a sky full of tear gas. Morgan didn't talk about glory or pain. He just drank his black coffee and kept peace with his silence. Though Morgan had once been loved by crowds, the years were not always kind. He returned from the spotlight to a country that praised his music, yet questioned his place in it. His wife had passed, his mobility reduced, and he lived alone in a small house near the railroad tracks. But every morning, Maple House Diner reminded him of rhythm and routine. The jukebox played soft blues, the sunlight bounced off chrome, and the waitress Sandra Bullock always greeted him with warmth. For Morgan, the diner wasn't just food, it was stability, a place where no one expected anything from him except presence. But Redwood Junction wasn't free from bitterness. Jake Kendrick Paul, a loudmouthed local mechanic with a habit of bragging about military service he never actually completed, strutted into the diner most mornings like it belonged to him. Jake resented quiet confidence, and Morgan's silence threatened him. The town tolerated Jake because it was easier than confronting him. On Veterans Discount Tuesday, the diner was fuller than usual, and Jake saw Morgan sitting near the window, minding his coffee. Something in Jake, jealousy, insecurity, maybe wounded pride, snapped. And instead of turning away, he stepped toward Morgan's table with a smirk. Jake began with mocking comments about age, disability, and race. At first, the laughter from his friends came too loud, too sharp, but even they began to shift uncomfortably. Morgan didn't respond. His silence, the same silence that had steadied musicians in smoky clubs and protesters in the streets, was too powerful. And that only made Jake more desperate. Silence was a mirror, and Jake hated what he saw in himself. When Morgan finally lifted his eyes and quietly said, "Son, learn when a battle isn't worth its scars," the room went still. Jake felt the sting of humiliation and made the worst decision of his life. With a grin that pretended power but trembled at its edges, Jake lifted his steaming mug and poured hot coffee over Morgan's head. The scorching liquid dripped down Morgan's face and collar while gasps filled the diner. A phone camera clicked. A woman cried out. Morgan didn't curse, didn't strike, didn't even raise his voice. He simply closed his eyes, breathed once, and wiped his face with a napkin as though preserving dignity drop by drop. That moment, the quiet after harm, was more commanding than any anger could have been. But fate was already moving. 7 minutes later, the diner door opened. Michael B., Morgan Jr., Morgan's son, and a decorated U.S. Navy SEAL, walked in. He had returned home early from deployment, planning to surprise his father with breakfast. Instead, he found Morgan soaked in cooling coffee and Jake standing over him. Michael didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply looked. The room felt the weight of his presence, the same presence that once stilled danger in foreign deserts. Morgan met his son's eyes and gave him a small nod that meant, "Do not start the wrong war." But some wars need ending, not starting. Michael approached Jake slowly, with the deliberate calm of a man who had seen real battles. Jake tried to defend himself with excuses and laughter, but the words fell flat. The witnesses, who had watched silently, lowered their phones. The guilt in the room thickened. Michael placed his hand, not violent, just firm, on Jake's wrist and offered him a choice. Apologize and take responsibility, or face the sheriff and the law with 50 witnesses and multiple video recordings. Jake's bravado shattered. In front of everyone, with half-choked shame, he apologized to Morgan. The sheriff arrived, and Jake's consequences extended far beyond apology. Community service at the Veterans Center, mandatory bias awareness training, and public apology at the annual Veterans Night. But something else changed the town. The bystanders who watched without acting had to face themselves. Maple House Diner came under new management, run in partnership with local veterans, including Morgan. A new sign was hung. Honor Grounds, where respect comes first. And above Morgan's favorite booth, a photograph was framed, not of violence, but of restraint. The video of the coffee incident and apology spread online. People didn't share it for drama. They shared it because the victory was dignity, not retaliation. Classrooms, church halls, and community centers used it as a lesson. Letters came from veterans, musicians, single mothers, students who struggled to speak up. The phrase that spread with the message was Morgan's. Strength isn't proven by who you can hurt, but by what you refuse to destroy. Morgan continued to drink his coffee at Honor Grounds, same booth each morning. Michael visited often, but when he wasn't there, the town made sure Morgan was never alone. People opened doors for veterans without needing cameras. Respect stopped being something performed and became something lived. Morgan had endured humiliation without losing himself. Michael had protected his father without throwing a punch. And Redwood Junction became a place where the lesson stayed clear. Dignity does not shout. It stands.